Optometrist, but we need to forge ahead, whatever the cost. We never forgive nor forget. Patient. There are CMF street soldiers, some fresh out of the Chilesian Children's Theater, who are able to MacGyver fully functional 45 caliber semi-automatic ghost guns entirely out of yarn and snow globes. Or was it something else entirely, perhaps something literally about vision? The author liked to whisper in my ear. He'd grab me by my shirt sleeve and pull me down to his level. He had a powerful grip like a little chimp on PCP. He confided to me, sotto voce, concerned, I assumed, that Gabby was not in the right headspace to hear this information, that he suffered from PTSD and dissociative identity disorder, and that he self-medicates with alcohol. Seriously? I asked, and he waved the question away. He had this very effeminate way of waving his hand in the air as if to disperse a bad smell, his own presumably, whenever you broached something that vexed or embarrassed him. N'en parlons plus, he'd say. Let's forget it. Sometimes he talked as if he and his daughter were about to embark upon their very first working sojourn in Kermunkachunk, and sometimes he made it sound as if they'd just returned from their final trip. I guess I should have asked Gabby, but honestly, she makes me forget what I want to say. Gabby's unreal. She's like some CRISPR baby who's blossomed into the most exquisite, refined, intellectually audacious young woman who ever existed. I'm serious. But he, oh my fucking God, he's super annoying. He is easily the most tedious man on the face of the earth, a title which all the drunks I've ever known assiduously covet. Repeating the same things over and over and over again. Every 5 minutes he'd look at the rubber band I had wrapped around my finger and ask me if it was an authentic Waffen SS Totenkopf ring, death's head ring. My dead Puggle, who is my guru and my Buto teacher, came to me in a dream last night and gave me a new name. Physiognomy. He must have repeated that a dozen times in the hour he was here. And there is something blurry, something indistinct about the author, the father, we might as well call him at this point. But whereas he seems enshrouded in a swarm of flies, Gabby radiates an immaculate, luminous, shimmering aura. And it was my distinct impression that afternoon in my book-cluttered office in Waco that she is one of the most rare individuals who can, quote, dialectically experience reality in the process of And it was my distinct impression that afternoon in my book-cluttered office in Waco that she is one of those rare individuals who can, quote, dialectically experience reality in the process of uninterrupted becoming, end of quote, and be super, super hot. The latter, of course, an effect of the former. Have I mentioned recently that he repeats the same things over and over and over again? He said multiple times that he was wearing a mask and special iris reconfiguring contact lenses to foil facial recognition and biometric ID systems. All I saw were the bloodshot eyes and sallow, blotchy face of a career alcoholic. He said that the ghost of his dead Puggle dictated last orgy of the divine Hermit to a court stenographer, which is why it's in the form of an interrogatory or deposition. Late in the book, in one of his drunken soliloquies at the bar Polpo, presumably read from one of the spoken-word karaoke screens, he contends that he and his daughter don't even conduct their own ethnographic fieldwork, that the ghost of the dead Puggle commands Heinzelmenschen, or little gnomes, sometimes referred to in variant iterations of the folk tale as cunning little naked men, to do their ethnographic research for them as he and his daughter, quote, sleep, end of quote, i.e. drink. As appealingly whimsical as this notion might be that gnomes do our work for us as we knock back shots at some bar, the author's identification with homunculi, and the tiny robotic vermin and miniaturized mechanomorphic CMF street soldiers that scurry behind the toilets in the men's room at the bar Polpo is most likely an attempt to neutralize that very thing about which he feels the most abject, debilitating shame, his smallness. He has the little body of a sullen adolescent, by which I mean that tendency to rouse himself from his alcoholic torpor with a series of myoclonic spasms, and did I mention this before? Endlessly repeat himself like that fucking little leprechaun on PCP in the Lucky Charms commercial. and he seems, in his sad, childish solipsism and insularity, to have developed an imaginary coterie of friends comprised exclusively of his own body parts. Interrupting an intense conversation Gabby and I were having about the Soviet filmmaker Dziga Vertov, he suddenly announced, "My shoulders have completely different personalities from each other." Oh, that's good stuff. This shoulder, Mike, is very bold. It would eat cat poop and make speeches from a balcony if it could. Very meth and alligators. This other one, Ike, is quiet, very introverted, very insular. For Ike, life is an elliptical fever dream, very goth, very Emily Dickinson. Have you ever heard anyone go on the way I do? Have you ever heard anyone anthropomorphize his scapular asymmetry the way I do? He asked, basking in the spotlight, the belle of the ball. But he gave me a murderous look, his upper lip raised to expose his incisors. He knew I loved his daughter. He knew before any of us. At times I felt terribly embarrassed on Gabby's behalf. During these inane soliloquies, she'd listen and smoke her cigarette and nod in assent. It was obvious she'd intended this to be an amiable and productive meeting of colleagues who shared a common field of study, Silesia. There's a marvelous German word for that feeling of vicarious embarrassment. Fuck. What's that word? Fuck. Fuck. Fremdenschamen. I felt this overwhelming sense of, one might say, Fremdenschamen. When her father would, well, you can fill in the blank at this point. His scapular asymmetry was due to dominant use of one limb of his writing hand. Writing. Ha! He printed like a child. The patient stops, squints. Patient, is that right? There's a marvelous German word for that feeling of vicarious embarrassment. Fuck, what's the word? Fuck. Fremdschämen? I felt this overwhelming sense of, one might say, Fremdschämen when her father would, well, you can fill in the blank at this point. His scapular asymmetry was due to dominant use of one limb of his writing hand. Writing, ha, he printed like a child. Optometrist, yes, that's perfect. Patient, that's right? Fuck, Fremdschämen? Close enough. Patient. But Gabby, who, in her loving filial impulse to protect him, to elevate him, and to restore a sense of cordial dignity to the proceedings, would invariably come to the rescue with something completely witty and charming, finally says, salvaging an afternoon which at that point seemed almost irretrievably lost, quote, "Gentlemen, we're entering the realm of cephalopod neurophysiology here, of individual tentacles innervated to the extent that they literally have minds of their own. But once you grant a certain degree of subjectivity, of agency to your joints and your limbs and extremities, it can prompt all sorts of disconcerting insecurities." She took a deep drag on her cigarette, its tip sizzling red, and then exhaled. "I've begun to wonder," she said, frowning but with a wink for her dad's benefit, "if my left hand even likes me anymore, or if at this point it's just sticking around for the manicures." She was referring to the hand that held her cigarette, which inscribed little whorls of smoke in the air as she spoke and gesticulated, which drew my attention to her fingernails, each of which bore a tiny, perfect, shiny reproduction of Seurat's A Sunday Afternoon on the Island of La Grande Jatte. We'll take up the issue of whether paintings lose their Benjaminian aura when transferred to fingernails on next week's podcast, when our guest will be Lexi Martone, the nail artist featured in the new TLC reality series Unpolished. I will also be conducting a graduate seminar luncheon entitled How a Hydrocephalic Garden Gnome and His Astonishing Daughter Wrote the Definitive Ethnographic Study of the Chilesian Mafia Faction. This will take place on Thursday, April 23rd, 12 to 2 p.m. at the Jack in the Box at 1525 Interstate 35 North in Waco. They were such a mesalliance. These two, if one can apply that term to a father so clearly outclassed by his own daughter. I do love her. No use denying it any longer. Also, she has a lovely singing voice, more about which later. Had so much fun at the NJ Society of Optometric Physicians party last night, I never knew there was a bowling alley in the Port Authority. Sorry I'm so terrible. Damn arthritis. Great seeing you and Irv and Phil. By the way, I fell in love too on the bus back home. A big blowsy lumpin' woman, peroxide blonde hair with black roots, puffy coat open to a see-through white tank top. I'm an old man. I can't do this work forever. At this point, my arthritis is making it difficult for me to get the lenses in and out of the phoropter. It would be wonderful to retire and to have a woman like that as a companion, as a comrade. I was sending invitations to her in this monotonic, almost liturgical, telepathic voice in Latin. Sit on this old optometrist's face. Asphyxiate me, cannibalize me. Wasn't it Elias Canetti who said the earth asphyxiated by the letters of the alphabet? I want you to walk around Costco with my enucleated eyeballs in your bra. These 14 words festooned conspicuously across the blank page. In the middle of the Snellen chart, in the middle of the spoken word karaoke screen, crayoned in big characters in the middle of a poster out on the piazza. I want you to walk around Costco with my enucleated eyeballs in your bra.